Hi BookTube, and welcome to a bonus video. These are bonus for me and I hope for you too. This is a mystery haul unboxing because I have in my hands a box that's come all the way over from Florida in the United States. One of my subscribers has very kindly sent me a box of 15 books. He said he needed to make a bit of space and had to part with a few of his books, and we've had several conversations. He's recommended me an awful lot of books to read over the last couple of years, including Galen Strawson's Things That Bother Me. That's the one off the top of my head that I remember that he's recommended. His name is Mitchel Axler. He doesn't have a BookTube channel. He is, just a lover of books and a heavyweight reader, by which I mean he has read widely, he has read deeply. He's read stuff that I've never heard of but are right in my wheelhouse, hence the recommendations. And he always makes really incisive points in his comments to mine and other people's videos. We're both big William Gass fans and William Gaddis fans. And anyway, so he sent me this book. I do not know what's in here. I know a couple of things because we've talked on email about them. I have carefully blotted out both his and my address so that the world of the internet cannot trace us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what goodies we have here. I have no idea. Mitchell has very generously said, just because they're a gift, that I shouldn't feel obliged to wax lyrical about them if they don't, they're authors I've heard of but don't appeal or whatever. So, here we go. I'm very excited about this. Oh goodness, rather elegantly packed as well. Okay, book number 1, Middle G, William Gass. I actually have this. I haven't read it yet. I have it to read. First thing to see is Mitchell a writer of books? No, he is not. I have the exact same edition because it's deckled edges. I don't know how Mitchell feels about deckled edges. They drive me potty. Alfred J. Knopf, I assume this is published by, because they seem to be universally deckled edges. Is that who the publisher is? Yes, Alfred A. Knopf, not Alfred J. Knopf, that's Alfred J. Prufrock. So, Mitchell, if you don't mind, I shall probably re-gift this, or do it as a giveaway, because I've recently passed 1,000 subscribers, as YouTube informed me, although I suspect I'll probably bounce around, around that threshold. So, Mitchell, if you're all right, I'm going to repurpose this, or I might keep yours and repurpose mine, and give this as a giveaway to a subscriber. The Plains by Gerald Narain. Okay. Introduced by Ben Lerner. Okay. I read a book by Gerald Narain a couple of years ago, and it's one of the most unique reading experiences I've ever had. I went into quite a lot of detail about it. I'll post the link to it. I did say at the time I wasn't sure if he was able to do anything different, if his subsequent books were going to be different. But I'm going to read this and let's see if it's the same shtick. And I don't mean that in a pejorative fashion, pejorative meaning. It is an incredibly literary shtick all of his own. Let's see if this is similar or it goes in another way. So I shall definitely read that. Willie Master's Lonesome Wife by William Gass. I love this book. I've read it. This is a rather... I'd have to look up and see what edition I've got of it, because this, if it's not the same edition, this will replace it, and I will repurpose and re-gift mine. This is quite an experimental book, as you might expect with Gass. It's very funny. It's very clever. It's quite sexy as well. Heart of the Original by Steve Aylett. Originality, creativity, individuality. A sizzling and hilarious manifesto where its author means every blazing word. Alan Moore. Well, that's recommendation enough if Alan Moore's saying that. Actually, Alan Moore's written more on the back. Force-fed with ideas until its liver explodes, this staggeringly brilliant book has scarcely a line in it that won't make you wish you'd thought of it. Raising the bar to the point where it's a hazard to migrating birds. I think Moore's going a bit over the top with his metaphors here. This is a sizzling and hilarious manifesto where its author means every blazing word, which makes a case for the caged animal repetitive behaviour of our culture that cannot be argued against by anyone with an honest bone in their head. Written in his own brains, half of the original should be tattooed on the backs of all the limp reimaginers currently crowding our TV screens, our multiplexes and our surviving bookshops. Amen to that, Alan. Probably the most astonishing thing that you will read during this otherwise Astra incarnation. Well, this is going pretty much to the top of my list, I think. I've heard of Steve Aylett, but I can't place the name, so I'm just going to read the blurb on him. Steve Aylett is the author of several books, including Lint, Slaughtermatic, and Novahead. He was awarded the Jack Trevor Story Award in 2006. Okay, so I think he's a sci-fi writer. I've definitely heard of him, but I don't think I've read anything of him. It's quite a short book. It was about 128 pages, something like that. So I'm going to look to read this fairly quickly, I think. So that's absolutely spot on, because I like a manifesto, and I particularly like a critical manifesto, which is what this seems to be. Right, Flannery O'Connor, Wise Blood. Now, you may have seen the film, even I've seen the film, and also Ministry did a song based on based on something out of that film. I can't remember what it was called now. May even have been called Wise Blood, the track. I've never read it. The film was extraordinary. The subject matter is extraordinary. So, I'm pleased that I shall be reading this. Will Eaves, the absent therapist. Will Eaves, the guy who wrote Murmur. The Absent Therapist is a miniature but infinite novel, and unlike anything I've read before, it's just achingly good, says Luke Kennard. The Absent Therapist is a book of soundings, a jostle of voices that variously argue, remember, explain, justify, speculate and meander. Sons and lovers, wanderers, wanderers, i.e. wanderers, people who wonder, and wanderers, people who wonder about things. Stayers, leavers, readers and believers. The biggest surprise of all is frequently that things and people really are as they seem. These are gripping narratives with intriguing shifts of register, but they're also technically experimental and daring. Each sentence is weighed, poised. I haven't heard of this. Published in 2014. I assume it's by the guy who wrote Murmur. It's not listed. It must be the same guy. Anyway, that sounds intriguing. Are they short stories? It's hard to say. Anyway, good choice. I like the sound of that. Wittgenstein's Mistress. I've never. I don't think Mitchell's aware because I haven't mentioned it on BookTube, but I have read it, and I must admit, as huge a fan of Marxism that I am, this book slightly baffled me, slightly confounded. Didn't quite know what to make of it. Funnily enough, I'm in the process of sort of slowly rereading it because it is a book partly involving solipsism, the idea that no one else exists. Mitchell's given another interpretation, which I think is quite an interesting one. It's someone literally laying out the whole baggage of their life on the page, which I hadn't really thought of before. So that's going to help inform my reading. I'm going to keep this because this is in beautiful condition, much better than mine. So I'm going to repurpose my copy. So Desert Divers by Sven Lindqvist. Okay, I don't know this. In the first half of the 20th century, European writers plunged into the stony baking expanse of the Sahara, drawn by their own strange dreams. What did they hope to find and what was really there? In Desert Divers, part travel book, part literary history and part confession. I do like a literary confession. I've done one in my own current work. Sven Lindqvist follows their paths into the Sahara and drags to the surface the history of colonial slaughter and exploitation that enabled Europeans to conduct their one-sided affair with the desert. A poem to the Sahara and those to whom it has obsessed. Language as bare and hard as sand and gravel. Sensational, says The Guardian. So I'm going to look forward to reading that. Works on paper, essays by Elliot Weinberger. Okay, so Mitchell and I discussed this in email, and he has said Weinberger is, I think, one of the 2 or 3 most interesting essayists in America, but is actually more popular in Spain and Germany than here. Works on paper could be read as a collage rather than individual essays. I like the sound of that, which they initially appear to be. And he brings to light matters that no one else does. And then he talks about other stuff that Weinberger has written. He's also a famed translator of Octavio Paz, the poet who I read many years ago, an editor of Anthology of Contemporary American Poetry, and is best known in America for his essays opposing the invasion of Iraq and the utter disregard of truth by the Bush administration. Okay, so works on paper. Invention of Asia as part 1, Extensions of Poetry as part 2. And there's one on Paz, one on the death of the poet Kenneth Rexroth, The Modernists in the Basement and the Stars Above. So yes, if Mitchell says this is one of the foremost contemporary essayists, that's good enough for me. Okay, the Universal Baseball Association, Inc., by Robert Coover. I read Coover's book, Lucky Pierre. Didn't really get on with it, but I because I didn't get on with it, I wanted to read something else by Coover. Just to give me was that just a book that didn't work for me? Are there other stuff in his I might like? And I really love the sound of this. It's about a guy who sort of plays fantasy baseball. That sort of the stats of baseball players equate to points, and you have teams and stuff. And this guy runs a fantasy baseball league, and I did really like the sound of it. But before I got to it, I read Coover's Noir. Book called Noir, which is obviously about a sort of postmodern version of noir, and again it didn't really do anything for me. And I've had The Public Burning by Coover for a long time without having got round to reading it, so I'd sort of put a halt on Coover. But I do want to read this. I don't know kind of why it sort of slipped out of my memory. I think because I'd sort of got slightly burned with the two that I had read and was umming and ahhing about The Public Burning, which I have, but I've never actually gone and invested in this. So now that I have it in my possession, I'm definitely going to read it because I love the sound of it. And when was this published? '68. Okay, so this concept of sort of fantasy sort of sports games, he was ahead of the curve because now it's a huge industry in soccer, in NFL, in baseball. My own sons play fantasy NFL. So it's really become a big thing. But he was writing about that in '68. So, I'm really looking forward to that. Gas, Omen Set Us Up. I have to ask, Mitchell, that you're getting rid of a lot of who I take to be your favourite writers. I hope that you kind of got 2 copies of these books and you're just parting with one of them. I don't know. You can let me know about that. I've read Omen Set Us Up. I read it 2 years ago, and what a surprising book it was. Surprising for me because it's it's sort of set in 19th century backwoods Ohio, and it's about sort of preachers and good souls, sort of virtuous men, which is not normally the type of thing I'm terribly interested in, but this is so beautifully wrought. And the section with the preacher when he's sort of preparing a sermon, and he's rehearsing a sermon, walking around the sort of little cemetery in outside of the church. But he's full of bile and hatred. That's a brilliant section. So again, though, this is beautifully preserved, and so I'm going to take this and repurpose my copy of it. I hope to say that my copies are not beyond the pale. That if I do end up sending them out to subscribers, you're not getting something that's tattered and shredded. And still more goodies. This looks interesting. Oh, Moby Dick. This is Mitchell's favourite book, and I've never read it. Again, I hope, Mitchell, you've got another copy of it. This is the Penguin copy. It's got deckled edges. I will read it, but it's one of those bucket list books, really. I have to find a sort of mental block of time to read it. I think Mitchell describes it as one of the, if not the best book that's come out of American letters. And I think he also said, I may have got this wrong, so please correct me if I've got it wrong, Mitchell. I think he said it's surprisingly sort of experimental. I may have got that horribly wrong. This feels more than 15, that Mitchell suggested. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11... Yeah, about 17. 1982, Janine, by the recently parted, sadly, Alistair Gray, who was a very formative writer for me, one of the earliest writers I read. Scottish writer who was also a painter and illustrated quite a few of his books. I'm sort of part way through his mammoth 900-page every short story, so all his short stories collected into one volume. But this is terrific. This is interesting. Jim Thompson, The Killer Inside Me. Never read it. I only know of it because there's a song by a white Texas hip-hop artist called MC 900 Foot Jesus called The Killer Inside Me. So I assume that it drew its name at least from this. And the song is great. And if it's of similar themes to the book, this is going to be a highly enjoyable read. So I look forward to that. Why I've not written any of my books by Marcel Benabou. Now, I've not heard of this author at all. Benabou, is this the other person we talked about? Don't think it is. No. Benabou addresses conflicting impulses between writing and reading, writing and living, following great models and being original. And he has a great deal of gentle self-deprecating fun while doing it. But this isn't just about the wordplay beloved of French modernists, and myself, I have to say, as anyone who's read my books will attest. At base, it is a lovely book about the love of books and language, and all that goes into the making of them, be it paper or words. Now, that's interesting, because I read a book about the love of books by the Canadian writer who wrote All Men Are Liars. What's his name? I can't remember. But this is a non-fiction book, again, about the love of books. And I was really disappointed in that. So, the best book I've read about the impact of books is called The Child That Books Built by Francis Spufford, who's an English writer. But it's about, it is about books read in childhood. I need a good book about adult reading. So with a bit of luck, this could provide it. When was this published? 96, okay. Farewell to the Reader is one of the chapters. Cool, I'm looking forward to that. Jerome Ferrari, The Principle, a novel. Well, I've not heard of this. With the precision of a theorem, good start, the principle goes beyond a simple portrait of a life and its grey areas in order to interrogate the foundation of truth. The epistolary effect of a narrative addressed to its subject during the uncommon, but in this case it works. The principle is part accusation, part plea, part question inquest. Okay, that's interesting, because I like books that directly address the reader, that almost make the reader complicit. Although in this case, if it's more j'accuse to the reader. So I'm going to enjoy reading that. When was this published? 2015. Oh no, yeah, 2015. Okay, so I have a sneaking suspicion that's going to go up quite high up on my list, along with that Steve Aylett book. I think they're going to probably be the first two of this that I'm going to read. Christopher Logue, All Permanent Red. Well, Christopher Logue is a poet, I believe. I've not read him. Christopher Logue's work in progress, his Iliad, has been called the best translation of Homer since Pope's. Here in All Day Permanent Red, which is the title of the book, is doomed Hector, the lion, slam scattering the herd at the height of his powers. I always rooted for Hector. When we were studying the Iliad, I always rooted for Hector over Achilles. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. It's a silly reason. That the football team I supported at the time had a striker called Kevin Hector. So that's why I always favoured Hector. I've always backed losers. Here is the Greek army rising with a sound like a sky-wide Venetian blind. That's a nice image. Here is an arrow's tunnel the width of a lipstick. Wow. Through a neck. Like Homer himself, Logue is quick to mix the ancient and the new because his Troy exists outside time, and no translator has a more Homeric interest in the truth of battle or in the absurdity and sublimity of war. Is it poems? I guess it's poems, but obviously all linked around events in Troy. And when was this published? (2003). And finally, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Lectures and Conversations. Compiled from that, yes. So this is what Mitchel's written about this. They, like all his later works, the Blue and Brown books, Philosophical Investigations, Culture and Value, Uncertainty, is not written by Wittgenstein, but are careful lecture notes recorded by his students, among them Iris Murdoch. I have great fondness and respect for his later period, for I think he solved most of the perennial questions of philosophy. I agree, but I think his solution was that philosophy was a waste of time, wasn't it? Because it doesn't. I think, I may have this wrong, but I think he was sort of saying that the only things useful worth studying are hard and fast things in front of us in our daily lives. Things that can be established as fact. And the problem with philosophy, such as abstracted thought, is that cannot fulfil those criteria. Therefore, it's not worth studying. Talk about turkeys voting for Christmas. Indeed, it was his writings that stopped me from completing my dissertation for the doctorate in philosophy. I did teach a seminar on Wittgenstein during this time. Later on, I discovered that he was William Gass's favourite philosopher as well. I think Wittgenstein is the favourite philosopher of a lot of serious-minded authors because, primarily he's dealing with language, making us think about language. Gass taught philosophy for 50 years at Washington University in St. Louis, a seriously underrated institution. Okay, I didn't know Gass was a philosophy lecturer. So, there we have it. So, the only books that I would reject are ones I already own, of which there's mainly William Gass and Alistair Gray. But they are so beautifully preserved, much nicer state than mine. I'm going to swap them over, so thank you. I think the only one that doesn't apply to is Middle C, because we have exactly the same edition, and mine's in reasonable condition for once, unlike most of my books. And as I say, I think the books that I'm going to leap to immediately, or as soon as I can, are this Heart of the Original by Steve Aylett, which is non-fiction, and Jerome Ferrari, The Principle, which sounds fascinating. The Murnane, I'm definitely going to have to be in the right mindset for that, because as I say, it's such a unique and slightly estranging reading experience. I think you have to, or I have to be in a certain mindset to be able to receive, Moraine style, but I'm definitely going to read it because, as I say, it will form the verdict for me as to whether I'm going to continue on reading all his oeuvre or no. I've got a pretty good idea of what he's about. What a great cover Wise Blood is. Will Eves. So I haven't heard of this book. I've heard of Will Eves, so I'm intrigued to read that. It's a couple of non-fictions. I tend to go in sort of jags of reading non-fiction just to have a break from fiction. So we've got this Marcel Bernabout and Wittgenstein. There's Christopher Logue on Troy. Essays by Elliot Weinberger, again non-fiction. The Jim Thompson. So as I say, the title, if nothing else, and my association of it to a hip-hop song. Definitely going to read that. Moby Dick. I don't think I'm going to get to Moby Dick this year because the two big monster books I've got on my plate for this year are Ducks Newburyport, and I need to try and make further headway with The Infinite Jest. Coover. I will definitely be reading that this year. I'm glad it sort of forced me to re-engage with Coover because I'd sort of given up on him. And, if I like this, I need to get to The Public Burning because I've read bits of it and it's good, but just those first two books of his I read put a bit of a mental block on Coover for me. So this is going to push me back into it, which is good. And a book on desert divers, which sounds absolute. I don't read a lot of travel writing, but I do like travel writings that are meditations. And the desert for me is far more interesting than, say, mountains or forests or oceans. I think of all those sort of type of landscapes. The one I'm most interested in is deserts, because they are almost the least landscaped, or the least landmarked of all of these other landscapes, which opens up to complete abstraction, and that's what I like. You know, in my art, I like abstract expressionism. In my writing, I like the sort of abstract metaphoricalizing. So there we go. So Mitchel, thank you so much. I do, as I say, I do hope that these aren't your only copies of these books. I do hope they're sort of extras. You know, I can't believe you've given me your only copy of Moby Dick, because it's your favourite book. So that sort of puts me fairly sort of relieved in my mind that these are just extra copies. There's not one duff one there among them. I know you told me that, you know, I didn't have to be nice. I'm not being nice. As I say, the only issue is some of them I already own, but most of those I'll be swapping out for your versions. So thank you again. And for the rest of my viewers, I hope you found that interesting. Please do comment on you know, any of these books if you've read them or would like to read them. And I will get it together to do a giveaway. I need to go back and check if my subscribers is currently sat over 1,000 or not. I mean, YouTube sent me the email saying, congratulations, you've got 1,000. I wonder if they send one, oh, actually, you've bounced back down to 998 or whatever. So, you know, I don't know what my current subscriber level is. I never particularly look at it. But if it is sort of seemingly stable at over 1,000, I will do a giveaway with Mitchel's permission. Some of these doubles will be included. So, till next time, thank you very much.